is not intended to be long. It's more of just an introduction to what services we can help provide. And but I'd love to hear just from each of you real briefly your name and the location you're coming from, and if there are any particular challenges or projects that have encouraged you to participate in this webinar. So it'd just be good to get a feel so I can kind of tailor the talking to meet your needs. So if you don't mind, Molly, can you walk us through calling on individuals?
Sure thing.
And then, perfect, thank you.
Leo, let's start with you.
I'm in North Hornell. I'm just a community member. I'm just trying to learn what I can.
Great. How about Gloria? Oh, just called on you as you took a sip. Sorry about that.
There's Dr. Hutton, and there's Mason Village. And there's Coco.
We can go. You want us? We'll come back to you, Gloria. Carolyn.
Hi, this is Carolyn and my husband Steve. We're from Venture Lake, and we're really here just to find out what your services can be used for. We have a lot of different issues, infrastructure and refinancing and a whole gamut of things. So shed your light on us.
All right, thanks.
How about Patty?
Let me unmute. Okay. Hi, I'm Patty Reynolds from Brittany Terrace at Rock Tavern, New York. And we've had a lot of issues with our sewer pumps and actually some water lines and various things. We are a new rock. It's just been a year. And so we're really just getting started to do some infrastructure projects that have been let go for many years.
Thanks, Patty. Ron, how about you?
Yeah, Ron Palmer from Geneseo, New York, Lakeville Village. And I'm a lot like Carol and Leo. I want to know what's available to us. Should it be necessary in the future. We're in pretty good shape right now, but we want to be prepared for the future.
Great. Pat Emerson.
I am from the Woodlands community in Hornell, and we did a water and sewer project 2 years ago and are looking to do an electrical infrastructure get that completed because our electrical infrastructure is bad.
Okay.
And so we're looking for help there. So.
Great, thank you. Gloria, how about now? You ready?
Okay, I'm Gloria Pease from Venture Lake. I'm the treasurer, and I'm here to learn whatever I can to better help my board.
Perfect. Dennis and Trish.
Hi, Marilla Country Village. We're in Alden, New York. We're coming up for refinancing this coming year, so we're kind of some of the engineering studies and what we need to do. We also need some work on our water, but I mean, it's not serious that we need to jump into it right away, but we'd like to see what engineers and what are our options.
Sure. Great. How about you, Beth?
Yeah.
Basically what Dennis said, we've been having more and more issues with water that would be good to see down the road. The refinancing, like he said, I just want to learn in case what's available. Maybe it's something we didn't even think about. And then, if anything would work towards new homes we're trying to put in.
Great. And Mike.
Hi, Mike Riley, Caterhouses Acres, Milton, New York. We recently finished a huge infrastructure project. We still have a little more to do, and I just kind of want to see what I can take out of this to move forward.
Great. And since John is driving, I will do his introduction for him. So John, works with the Homeownership Preservation Initiative. He works with me at Pathstone, but much more broadly focused on manufactured housing writ large in Western New York. So not so much of a co-op focus. So, and John, if I messed that up, you can interrupt at any time. So.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, great. Great. All right. So my name is Jennifer Vaughn, and I am an environmental engineer with Hunt Engineering. But my specialty is grant writing and supporting communities from the conception, having the idea of what they might need to have improved, and helping them move through that process to enable the project to happen, and then help implement the project. So my role at Hunt is primarily the grant consulting services. So Hunt Engineers, we have been in business for about 45 years. We're a full service architecture and engineering firm. We have our main offices in Horseheads, New York, where I'm located. But we also have offices in Rochester, New York, and Towanda, Pennsylvania. And Hunt likes to be in it for the long haul, so to speak. So our goal is to partner with communities and community organizations and work with them, for a long term. We're not necessarily motivated by the individual project as much as we are motivated by establishing a relationship and helping you to achieve your long-term goals. So my area of specialty, the grant consulting services, begins simply with communication and planning. So taking the time to meet with you, whether it's in person or on the phone or through video, and learn about what your community's needs and priorities are. And then once we are able to understand those needs, and sometimes understanding those needs includes developing a report. And so I know it was who said they were working on this water study. Was it Dennis? So at times that planning is a formal planning process where we're researching and writing a preliminary engineering report, or a facilities report, or an assessment of inventory to understand what you have and identify what the needs are then. Once the needs are clearly understood and the priorities are placed upon projects, then we dig into researching what grants are currently available. And the currently available grants change constantly as funding becomes available at either the state, federal, or private levels. It's a constantly moving target, and so what works one year might not work the next year, just based on what funding opportunities exist. And sometimes there are creative ways to finance projects. But once the needs are understood, then we can research and try to match up needs with funding sources. And then after that step is completed, then it's time to develop a comprehensive application. And just like each funding opportunity comes and goes, the application requirements are unique to each funding program. Each application requires different information and different levels of complexity. Some grant applications are simple, one page, describe your project, let us know how much money you need and why it's important to you. Other grant applications require, upwards of 40 technical uploads just to meet the requirements of that grant application. So Hunt is versed in working really closely with the clients and understanding the directives of those applications, and working really closely with those who are offering the funding. So as we're developing the grant application, we'll have conversations with those funding agencies to, confirm that what we're providing meets their expectations, and helping to develop the cost-effective budgets, clearly documenting your need. And documenting need often requires some technical support or support from your local agency. So maybe the local Department of Health, or the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, if it's a sewer project, but teaming with another agency to then provide clear documentation of your need and that it's meeting a regulatory requirement always helps with the strength of an application. And also clearly articulating the objectives. Typically, the objective of a grant of a project is that it's going to improve the quality of life for the people living in that area. And so is it going to improve their quality of life by having, proper pressure through their water system, or protecting them by managing the sewer waste and protecting public health? Is it protecting the environment? So those types of needs are clearly articulated in the application. And applications, need to be complete, and they also need to be timely. There are strict deadlines that need to be adhered to for applications as funding windows open and close. So that's the application development phase of our grant consulting services. And then if a project is awarded, then it comes with quite a bit. Typically, if it's a state or federal grant, there's extensive grant administration and reporting requirements, which definitely can be confusing, and it's a lot of information, and it requires a lot of coordination within your community, with your consultants that are hired, with the funding agencies, and also with your regulatory agencies that are providing oversight for infrastructure primarily. So a lot of coordination and lots of paperwork. Environmental reviews are often public hearings that are required, and routine reporting that's required throughout the once you receive the grant, you need to do some paperwork to execute the grant so that those funds become available to you. And once those funds are available, there's additional paperwork reporting that needs to be completed to disperse those funds, and then also paperwork to demonstrate that the funds are being dispersed properly. And then there's a closeout process where everything's tied up and then set aside. So quite a bit of work at that stage, and having a good team around you is really important in order to be successful, that you not only are offered the money, but you can utilize the money and keep the money. So that's an important part of the grant process. And then I did just mention project completion, where the project is being, the construction is completed, proper oversight and reporting is completed. There's a professional engineer that provides a certificate of project completion and the steps for grant closeout and final reimbursement. So HUNT's experience with grant writing. So I've just captured the last few years from 2017 to 2019. And during that time, we've leveraged $73 million to support 31 different communities throughout New York State. And so leverage, that's the total project amount. And of that $73 million of projects, 40 million of that was grant funds, and the remaining 33 million were contributions from other organizations or the communities themselves. So most grants require a contribution from the community, or it could also, you could combine multiple grants in one project, and sometimes they can match each other. So depending on the type of project, looking at different funding opportunities that you can pull together, you can definitely get some very positive results for your community to advance projects. And HUNT's area of expertise for grant writing, we're primarily focused on infrastructure. Municipal water and wastewater that's the group that I belong to, but then I also support HUNT's technology group with broadband infrastructure and communications. And then we also, while we're working with communities for water or wastewater, we often support other community projects like urban forestry, planting trees in their area, Main Street revitalization, which we've done helping communities to improve the physical appearance of their main streets and downtown areas. Administration like records management grants, and then also planning grants that would help lead a community to a further project. And this is the area HUNT primarily serves. These are counties that we have excuse me, achieved successful grant applications that led to projects. If you're not in this area, we're still willing to talk to you, but it is a little bit further from our center, but we certainly are willing to have a conversation and see if we might be able to meet your needs. I'm gonna take a drink, excuse me. Thanks. So kind of I think the bottom line for grant applications is that many community projects are eligible for grants. And the key really is well-developed planning. Having the foresight to clearly understand your needs, get the documentation of those needs, and also to research and understand the grants that are available. And projects ultimately shouldn't just be done because the money's available, but they should be done because it's going to improve the quality of life of your residents or the environment. Sometimes people get excited when they hear about a grant, and there's a perception sometimes that money's available, so I should do that project. But you need to recognize that doing any project typically requires your own investment as well, and it requires a huge investment in time and energy. And so it's really important that you pursue the projects that are going to have the largest impact on your community, as opposed to just chasing the money, so to speak. But you want to be aware of what money is coming available, because that might encourage you to do something that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. But truly understanding your community needs is very important. So focusing in on our personal, my site civil group specialty is water and wastewater infrastructure. And so within that water and wastewater infrastructure, there are planning grants that are available. The New York State Community Development Block Grant offers community planning grants. And then New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation and USDA, they also offer planning grants to municipalities. So recognizing that you're within a municipality, if you wanted to pursue those grants, there would need to be some teaming with your local municipality where they would be the grant recipient, and they would help to obtain the funding and help to administer the funding, but you would be the subrecipient of those funds. So that requires some coordination and a good collaboration and relationship. And then for implementation or construction of projects, there are also different funding sources for that. And this year, with the COVID crisis that's upon all of us, New York State's funding grant opportunities has been impacted significantly. Typically in July, there's an announcement of about 30 to 40 different grant opportunities that New York State is offering. This year they did not make that offering at all, and discussions with the regulators and the grant funders is that those funds are not anticipated to be released this year, while things kind of stabilize and the state understands its budget and allocations. So this is an unusual year. Typically we've had these recurring grant cycles that we've been able to depend on, and we haven't seen that this year with the state funding. However, the federal funding with the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, they have continued to operate without a hitch. In fact, they've had some additional funds become available for some of their programs. So that funding source has been steady, and it's anticipated that the New York State Community Development Block Grant will open at some point in the future. They have been allocated money, and because their money is allocated from the federal government and then state administered. So it's anticipated that'll come through eventually, but there's no indication at this time as to when. So that's kind of the story on grants there for water and wastewater that we typically take advantage of. And then I wanted to share with you a case study, which is currently ongoing, the Newtown Creek community. So Molly, you can fill me on what year were they established as a community owned?
2018, so they're pretty new.
Yeah. Okay, and so 2018, and I know Hunt had assisted with that as they were established, helping to develop that assessment of their infrastructure. And during that time, it seemed that things were fine as far as their water and their sewer systems. And so the financing was advanced and they took ownership. And then shortly after that, like immediately after, they had in their water logs for their well, they identified there was some significant water loss indicating some leaks. And a plan was kind of put into place to address the water loss. And before that could be moved along, they had a major sewer break and had raw sewage directly under some of the homes. And that became, a very high priority to fix. But unfortunately, because the initial assessment didn't identify these major problems, the funds weren't in place to address those major problems. So we were able to so we were able to follow some of the planning. So a preliminary engineering report was written that went into great detail about the problems that were existing with the sewer infrastructure, the water infrastructure, the storm sewer. A cost estimate was developed as to how to repair that infrastructure. The Department of Health provided record there was record of the water loss and record of the sewer challenges, and so there's a letter of support from the Department of Health stating the need for the project. An income survey was completed of all the residents in the community, and the purpose of that income survey was to enable eligibility for the Community Development Block Grant. The Community Development Block Grant is designed to serve communities that have 51% or greater low to moderate income, and that income needs to be demonstrated and documented through a formal income survey. So even though income data had been gathered in the initial development of the community-owned mobile home park, they needed to hire a firm to do an income survey that followed the exact requirements of the Community Development Block Grant, and presented the information as an overall summary of this low to moderate income. And those surveys are confidential, and in fact only the firm that does those income surveys, they maintain them in a permanent file, but it's never supplied to the funding agency, it's never supplied to your engineers. What is supplied is page one and one page 2 of 2 separate evaluations, so that it can be like demonstrated that they followed the right protocol, and the summary is provided. So that was a really important planning step, was to complete that income survey so that they were then eligible for this community development block grant. Another thing they needed to do for eligibility was to complete an environmental review. So they needed to work with the town and complete the State Environmental Quality Review, the seeker review, evaluating the impact of the proposed project. In this case, it's not required for the grant application, but the design drawings were developed ahead of time before the application was submitted, and that showed really clear project readiness. It was a very well developed application in that the design drawings helped to clearly specify the plan of action. And then the other critical piece for the planning was teaming with the town. So this community is located in the town of Horseheads, and the town of Horseheads is the grant applicant. So they are the ones who have their name assigned to all the documents, and they are receiving the funds and then distributing them to the consultants that'll work on the project. So having that town support and those conversations with the town was very important, and it's been a good working relationship, and has made this project possible. And it was important to the town to see it get done. That the community is located within their town, and they wanted to see improved quality of life for their residents. So they were willing to do it, and they've been super about it. But it definitely required not only like a meeting, but written confirmation that that was the agreement and what were the terms of the agreement. So that was preparing for the grant application. The grant application was submitted, and it was awarded, thankfully. And so that that project then required the grant execution. So that was, again, a lot of teaming with the town and the community and the funding agency to complete these different components. They completed a subrecipient agreement. They did a second environmental review, came up with a plan as to how to administer the grant. And then there needed to be competitive selection of the engineering firm and the construction contractors. And sometimes with a small project or a locally funded project, you could just pick the firm that you want to work with, or you could just pick the contractors that you want to have. You can hire them on the spot and you can do the job. But when you're receiving funds from the state or the federal government, they require that you offer fair and competitive competition. So that requires quite a few steps. There's a step of public notice in the newspaper, advertising all the bidding, and then you have enough time elapsed between your public notice and your distribution of the bid announcement, and then opening of the bids at a single time in a public manner, so that it's clear that there's no favoritism being played. And so this is an additional step that you wouldn't see if you were paying locally for your project. But it's part of the process when you're working with the state and federal government. And so again, that ties into these resolutions and public hearings and publications in the newspaper, all of which in the case of Newtown Creek were coordinated with both the community as well as the town. And final design and review and approval, since it is state and federal funding, again, the design not only has to be certified by your engineer, but it also needs to be approved by your funding agency. And then in the Newtown Creek community, because it was both water and sewer, it also required approval by the Department of Health and the sewer authority. And then there's the record management and reporting. So the process is, I would say arduous is a good word to describe state and federal grant funding, but it made the project possible. And so in this particular case, in the Newtown Creek community, the total project cost is $1,200,000 roughly. And of that, $1 million is grant from the Community Development Block Grant Program. And that $200,000+ is their ROC capital funds that they had in place. So that's how it did work successfully for them. And kind of an update on the project is that we've made it through the grant application period, the grant award, the grant execution, the environmental review. We've done the competitive selection of contractors, and now it's beginning to get into that phase of project administration where there's and construction. So construction's ready to move forward, and the bills are starting to come in, and it's all working along. So it's possible. It's definitely arduous, but it's definitely worth it because it makes a really positive community impact. And it certainly will, this project in particular, will definitely improve the quality of health for the residents, and it'll improve the water quality in the stream that's going through right behind their property. So a really great project, and I'm proud to be part of it, and I'm happy to be working with Molly on it. It's been a good project. So that's kind of the story. These are some examples of other projects that we've secured. All of these are municipal related. And I think, the short story is just to, remember that community projects are often eligible for grants. Planning's critical, and the project should improve the quality of life for residents. So that's the end of my formal talk. I'd be happy to kind of open it up for question and answer.
So Jen, if I can kick it off. So what I hear a lot of the time from folks is like, okay, we want a grant, but part of the reason we need a grant is because we don't have any money.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could talk about like upfront costs or, how to sort of start the process.
Absolutely, that's a great one. And so I'm speaking for Hunt Engineering, but I know this to be true of other engineering firms as well, is that the first step of that communication, we're happy to sit down and just have a conversation anytime to understand your priorities, understand your challenges, and really just talk through your ideas and projects. And that's consistent across other consulting firms. I've frequently given presentations with other consultants about grant writing, and we all really have the same starting process, is just give us a call and let's have a conversation, and we can meet with you in person, walk your property. All of that is just part of the typical marketing outreach that consulting firms do. So no cost for questions, no cost for initial brainstorming. Where you start to incur costs is as you develop into needing those definitive planning documents. So if you're looking to have an assessment done of your infrastructure, there would be a cost associated with that. If you need environmental reviews, you should anticipate a cost associated with that. Grant application development typically involves a cost as well. So Yeah, but to start with, having a conversation, I don't think there's an engineering firm in the state that's not gonna, take a call, listen to your ideas, and most likely if they're local, they'll come out as well and have a look. So I think that's a really common starting place.
That's great. Thank you. Sorry,
Sure.
now I'll let the actual attendees ask their questions.
Anything's fine.
Can the initial costs be added into that grant?
It really depends on the grant. So that's a great question. Typically, you cannot recover costs for applying for the grant for your efforts as far as grant application preparation. The funding agencies don't want to pay for the cost of preparing an application, but some components could be included, like environmental reviews. That's usually a cost that you could add in to a project. You could also add in the costs later for grant administration and reporting. When that cost estimate is developed, there's typically in the grants guidelines, they'll let you know, administration cannot exceed 5% of the total grant application or something like that. But there's room in the application in your budget where you could plan for some of these costs. It would not cover the cost of your initial grant application, but definitely you could cover the cost of your grant administration and the environmental reviews. So.
I also
Jennifer.
see you have multi-year plans. So if we had, let's say, like our water lines, we have 1.5 miles worth of roads. So I'm figuring there's 1.5 miles worth of water lines.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we want to do each street a year.
Mm-hmm.
How do they do that grant? Do they kind of do a 3-year grant, or do we have to reapply, or I guess?
Yep, those are good questions. So I would say sometimes there's a great benefit to taking on a larger project and also taking on a loan associated with that to cover the project costs. And the reason I say that is perhaps one part of your improvement is a critical improvement that has kind of the support there of like the Department of Health. And if that part of your project is combined with your whole project, then the whole project is looked at favorably and scored well for the grant opportunity. Whereas if it's a simple maintenance project, well, everybody needs to do maintenance. And so what's going to help your project stand out, and why would it be competitive? So sometimes it's better to, take a big bite, really take care of your problems, but in doing so, you lower your overall costs because you were eligible for more grant opportunity. Is that clear, the kind of the way I explained that? Because otherwise, like all those other parts, you would pay maybe 100% for instead of 50% for, or varying on your program. But yes, I think if you were looking at 5 individual projects, it would be 5 individual grant applications. And it's most likely that all 5 of those wouldn't be high priority projects from the funding agency's perspective.
And then there's also usually a timing out period that a grant needs to be spent within. Is that right, Jennifer?
That's true. Yeah, that's always clearly noted in the grant guidelines. So the example with the Newtown Creek community, their community development block grant has a 2-year window where you can start and end the project. Other funding programs may be more flexible, and I think in addition, if you were to go through the effort of one of these grant applications, you wouldn't want to do it 5 years in a row. It's definitely the type of thing that you want to go in big and do it really well and be complete. So
Carolyn, did you have, I thought I heard you earlier.
Yep, absolutely, of course. I always do. So Jennifer, primarily what you've been talking about all night is, or just so far, is working on grants. One of the things that our community is looking to do in the very near future is to do a refinance. And part of doing a refinance, from what I understand, is having an engineer do an assessment or evaluation of the community to be able to move forward in that process. So my questions to you is, how is that different from, let's say, an evaluation you might have done for coming in to do a grant? And what is the cost involved in that? Because that's obviously not, you know, something that we're going to fill out a grant application for.
Yeah, sure. So HUNT definitely does those evaluations as well, and that's how we began the process with that one case study that I shared. And so how those reports differ is really that the assessment became kind of like the foundation for the later report that was used for the grant application. And so the assessment was, you know, clearly focused on the existing infrastructure and the improvements that were there and the operation and maintenance costs associated with maintaining that infrastructure. Whereas the later study that was formed from that assessment went deeper into the community needs, both financially and in the environment, looking closely at the environmental needs and any other environmental concerns in the area. And the cost estimate was focused specifically on, you know, the specific improvement project, as opposed to an overall assessment of all of the infrastructure. So that's kind of how those two reports differed. They definitely were similar, but they had different end goals and different requirements for what needed to be in each of those. And I think the assessment evaluation, you know, was clearly driven by what are the needs of that program, whereas the later preliminary engineering report was really focused in on exactly what's being asked of in the grant application and meeting those needs. So yeah, definitely similar and some repetition, but two different outcomes are required, and so two different reports are created.
Okay, and how about cost on that?
Cost, yeah, I think it definitely varies depending on the size of your community and the infrastructure that you're looking at. And that's honestly something I don't know off the top of my head. That's not my specialty. Yeah, I could look back and see what we've done on similar projects, similar sizes, but I'd hate to give you a number off the top of my head because I really don't know. So, but yeah, if you want to reach out to me by email later and kind of give me, you know, a rough idea of the size of your community and things like that, then I can certainly help to come up with an accurate cost estimate.
Sure. Molly, would you be able to get me her email or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I think if you got my email earlier today, Jen was CC'd on it, so you should be able to grab her email there.
Perfect.
Just and there.
Yep, there it is at the bottom there. Yeah, that's our team of yeah, the two gentlemen at the top are our marketing team, and yeah, any of us would be happy to talk to you. Yeah.
Keep that slide up for a second. I'm just going to
yeah, take your time. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and Molly, I wasn't sure if through your organization you're often alerting the different groups that you work with as to different funding opportunities that come and go, or if that's something that
Yes.
Yeah.
Just sort of by chance. Mostly we focus on the CDBG and EFC somewhat, although I don't know of a community that's achieved an EFC grant. Excuse me. And actually Pat Emerson and Leo at the Woodlands, they did get a CDBG grant in the past, excuse me. So it's certainly, that's probably the most common route I've seen. And all of these communities also have a relationship with OCR already, because that's the channel through which they've gotten their acquisition financing. So that does help too in sort of connecting those dots.
Yeah, and if you can be successful with that, the acquisition financing, then you can do a grant application too.
Right.
But yeah, well, that's good.
Any other questions for Jennifer?
When I was at one of the rock seminars, the FDA said that we were talking about a storm shelter or community center, but more storm shelter. They said they have grants.
The Food and Drug Administration related to,
or
I think maybe it might.
USDA?
Yeah, I was thinking most likely it was the USDA. So they have grants like for community facilities, and so I would think a storms, like a safe space. Is that what you're referring to? Kind of like in an event of a storm? Yeah, I would definitely think that the USDA, through their community facilities grant program, would be a great place to think about a project like that. And for USDA grant applications, that particular funding opportunity, the community facilities, is open year-round. It's open currently. And the first step that USDA likes to have with prospective applicants is to have a conversation. You can do that, on your own. Just reach out to, you look on the USDA website. It's sometimes hard to find who your contact person is, but there are regional contact people, and I could provide that to Molly, and she could distribute that. But yeah, reaching out to your local USDA representative, and they actually administer a whole host of programs. Community or USDA offers just, I don't know how many, but they have everything from, broadband infrastructure, water, wastewater, community facilities. They have stormwater improvement grants, and then all their ag-related. So they have a lot of offerings. They have like research and development grants and economic development grants. So having a conversation with your local USDA representative would be a great idea, and you could talk about that project, and then also share with them any other projects that you're thinking about, and they could help to identify if there might be some other grant opportunities available. And their application process, it's pretty similar to the others, and it depends on the program as to whether it's open year-round or if it has a discrete funding window. But I definitely would encourage you to talk to your local USDA representative, and that's free for sure. And they help you. They won't write the reports for you, but they would let you know exactly what they need and when they need it. So they're a good organization to work with, and they often have low interest loans and long-term loans as well, up to 40 years. So it's a good opportunity to investigate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'll send you Molly the link to the USDA site that kind of directs you to your regional representative, as well as the programs that are available.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Any other ideas tonight?
If we're applying, let's say, we're in a little small, we're not actually in Marilla, or we're in Marilla, town of Marilla, and it's a very, very small town. So if we're trying to get this grant, let's say for to redo our water
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure, we have Erie County is our supplier of the water.
Mm.
So I don't know if we would go through Erie County and then have to have the town back us.
Yeah, that's what we did to think about that before. I think you could go either way. Is that, would you agree with that, Molly?
Yes, and I was
Yeah.
gonna say actually, Hornell, Pat and Leo at the Woodlands, their CDBG grant was sponsored by Steuben County versus the Newtown one,
Yeah.
which was by the town. So I think there's precedent for both, especially if you're in a very small. Pat, I don't know if you remember, was that why it was the county and not the town? Because the town's so small, or they just?
Well, Molly, we had to have approval from the town, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And we met with them, and but Steuben County agreed to take the administration
Right, it's a lot
of
of
it,
admin.
of the CDBG, and it worked great. It was
Yeah.
very, very efficient.
Excellent.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Dennis?
I think so. But because, well, Erie County Water Authority doesn't have nothing to do with Erie County.
Mm. That's
It's-
confusing.
I mean, they're their own entity.
Really?
Monitor our water that we get billed through them. So they monitor. The only reason they just called me last week and they said, we think you have a leak
Mm.
because your meter, as they do it every month, and it's jumped significantly. So we come to find out, yeah, we did have two major leaks, which they're being fixed right now. But I mean, it's not like I think we're okay water wise that we could, fix these two. This is the first time in 9 years that we've had major,
Mhm.
A water leak. All the rest of the stuff's just been fittings on water meters and valves, because before we bought the park, they put water meters in and used inferior products. And
Mm.
so we've been fixing them for 9 years. I think we almost got every meter fixed, but now it's to the point where, I mean, the park was built in the 70s. So that water lines and infrastructure is still in good shape.
Yeah.
But we said, let's run.
Yeah, I think water lines typically, if it's the standard materials, they're good for 70 to 100 years
Right.
in place.
Wow.
So you shouldn't anticipate, unless you have corrosive soils or if it was the asbestos line pipe, then sometimes communities want to move that out. But in general, you have a good long life on the water mains themselves.
So I'm weighing more that let's just keep fixing and get the connections fixed, and then we'll and replace water meters as we go, which we've been doing.
Yeah, that's a good plan.
Because they put cheap plastic meters in. Now we're on the other page, brass and high tech, and let's do it that. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Last call. I've noticed silence. You have to wait a long time on Zoom calls for someone to speak up sometimes.
Mhm. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. And if you want to talk further, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or my coworkers listed on the screen. And I wish you all the best, staying healthy during this time, as well as maintaining and managing your community infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Jen. This was
thank you.
wonderful. So appreciate your time.
Great. All right. Well, have a very good night.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, good.